did an interview, and during that interview, this is what Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, this is what he had to say.
In spite of all this nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. No one in the audience should be despairing. No one should be discouraged. We ought to be really encouraged by what happened yesterday. And in spite of all of the injustice, which of course friends and audience of this show, of our friend Steve know, we are going to prevail. That Supreme Court ruling yesterday on immunity is vital. The reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle on this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Kevin?
See, that's it. See, this guy said, folks, remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. This guy is a total fascist. This is before the election. This is like 6 months ago, I think, or maybe this is like a long time ago. 6 months, long before that. This is before the debates even. So last August or July. This is what Donald Trump. So it's more than just Donald Trump. These stupid, these crystal fascists, Heritage Foundation folks. All these things are because of that guy. Was it that little goof? Was it because of that guy there? That's why you have all these things, folks. What's going on in America? And it's more than Donald Trump is not smart enough to do all this, this strategic planning. I mean, come on. So there's something behind. These people are behind him, folks. These people are deep state people. That's why to say Donald Trump is not the establishment. He's part of the establishment. These people are establishment. They're a different type of the establishment. Very dangerous. We will go on.
Roberts said to the American people that we are in the Second Revolutionary War. And then he threatened the left, the Democrats, and said, it will remain bloodless if we allow it to be. Meaning, all that they are planning to do, all of what they are trying to put in place, if we allow it to happen, then we won't be harmed physically. Donald Trump is a master. Donald Trump is a master at creating chaos, at averting attention, at having us look over here while there's some real heinous and dirty shit going on.
This is not Donald Trump. Steve Bannon explained this. This is their strategy. This is the Steve Bannon strategy, actually. And he explained this.
Over here. Yeah. And so during Rachel Maddow's monologue the other night, I'm here to tell you, we are in a war. We are in a war. This is a hostile government takeover.
Achieving real results for your business starts with asking the right people the right questions. Create expertly crafted surveys with powerful AI that analyzes data for you for insights that change everything.
Holy
SurveyMonkey.
tonight. It's just
Let's
broken.
go back a little bit. I want to show you this, folks. Rachel
What Rachel
Maddow.
Maddow had to say.
Other story that is breaking just tonight. It's just broken. It's just developed sort of within the past couple of hours. And I want to bring this to you first. I'm not sure you've seen this elsewhere.
This is from like 11 days ago, folks. But I'm showing you this now. This is very important. They don't talk about this in the mainstream news.
You might remember a couple of weeks ago, we covered here on this show a sort of, in the grand scheme of things, a small-scale confrontation in one small government office in Washington. It's a little agency that you definitely haven't heard of. It's called the U.S. Africa Development Foundation. And the reason we covered what was going on there is because something unusual happened there when Trump went after that office, went after that agency and tried to shut them down. At that agency, they had a physical confrontation with people from Doge, from the Elon Musk austerity group. These would-be anonymous young men who work for Elon Musk. They showed up. You remember the story? They showed up at that small government agency and they demanded to be let inside. And that small government agency told them no. They said, we're an independent agency. We are actually not part of the executive branch. You have no legal authority over us. You have no legal right to come in. We do not invite you in. We say you can't come in. You cannot come in. And the Doge kids left when they were told they couldn't come in. But then the next day they came back with muscle. They came back with people who said they were U.S. Marshals. And we think those people were possibly armed. They were carrying guns. Now, the U.S. Marshal Service consistently will not comment on this. They will not say whether or not those people were actually U.S. Marshals. We have some reporting that suggests they may not have been U.S. Marshals. Nevertheless, they reportedly claimed to be U.S. Marshals. And with those men, with those people claiming to be U.S. Marshals, the young men from Doge did physically force their way into that agency and then locked out all the actual staff and changed the locks. So whether or not your heartstrings are pulled by the fate of that individual agency, right? You can see why this might be a qualitatively more worrying thing than some of the other stuff we have seen. I mean, there are legitimate legal disputes as to whether this Doge group has any legal authority over some of these agencies that they're trying to get into so they can take over their systems and fire their staff and shut them down. Those disputes are legal disputes that need to be sorted out legally. You can't just use guns to force your way in the meantime, as a means of settling that dispute. If there's a legal dispute as to whether or not you are allowed in a U.S. government building, and you cast that aside and say, we've got guns, and that's the grounds on which we're coming in, what that is an armed assault on the U.S. government. That is an armed assault on a U.S. government office. That's a break-in. That's call the cops territory. That's barricade the doors territory. I mean, at that point, what's to stop the little government agency from bringing in their own armed force, right? And then we shoot it out. That said, if there is an armed part of the U.S. government, somebody who's allowed, whose agents are allowed to carry weapons, who have badges, who are allowed to use physical force as part of their job, it's the U.S. Marshals or anyone else. If they are now working for Doge against other parts of the government that you might think have an equal claim to their services and protection, well, then if that's the case, Doge is something different than we thought it was. Do they have an army?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the president has given his top campaign donor the ability to use physical force, the ability to use the force of arms against other parts of the U.S. government, we are in a different place than we thought we were.
Yep.
Worrying possibilities were raised by that conflict at the U.S. Africa Development Foundation when that unfolded a couple of weeks ago. That's why we covered it here on this show when it happened. That led, last week, to a lawsuit being filed against the U.S. Marshals. Democracy Forward filed this lawsuit last week, asking in part why, quote, individuals associated with Doge have repeatedly invoked threats to engage the U.S. Marshal Service when seeking questionable access to agency buildings and information. So that happened at the U.S. Africa Development Foundation a couple of weeks ago, led to the lawsuit against the U.S. Marshals, demanding information from the Marshals last week. Well, now tonight, it has led to another physical confrontation. And this time, the agency in question actually did call the cops. In this case, it's something called the U.S. Institute of Peace. It works on things like research in conflict zones and training future diplomats. It was created by Congress during the Reagan administration. It was created in 1984. But it is not an official part of the U.S. government. It does not act in the name of the U.S. government. It is a separate institution. Nevertheless, on Friday, representatives from Doge showed up unannounced at their building. And they showed up unannounced, this time not with somebody claiming to be a U.S. Marshal. This time they showed up with FBI agents? Wait, the FBI works for Doge?
Mm-hmm.
They demanded entry into the U.S. Institute of Peace. The Doge team was reportedly met by lawyers for the Institute who informed them, quote, of the Institute's private and independent status as a non-executive branch agency. They told them they could not come in. The Doge representatives on Friday then departed. That was Friday. But now, today, apparently it has come to a different ending. We got this alarming quote from the CEO of that independent organization tonight. Quote, Doge has broken into our building.
Shit.
The New York Times.
Oh my God. See, so these guys are actually using violence, folks. Doge is using violence. And how come no one's... This is from 11 days ago. And she's the only one reporting this. Unless it's... They don't want to touch this. They're thinking this is not true, maybe. This is, But she's, quote, she has the receipts, though.
Times reports, quote, the U.S. Institute...
This is New York Times. Okay, New York Times reported this. This part, anyway, this one. So it's in the New York Times, so this is true.
For Peace called the D.C. police...
It's most likely true.
...on the Musk team members in an effort to stop them from trespassing because the Institute has control of its own building and the land it sits on. But instead, the D.C. police allowed them to enter and kicked out the Institute's officials.
When it comes to home insurance, there's really only one thing that matters. What happens when you make a claim? Square One is committed to...
FBI agents, reportedly, and the local police are being used by one government agency as an armed force against another part of the government, another government agency that controls its own building and that says you can't come in. What's going on here? And how do we figure it out? Joining us now is somebody who has been trying to pry loose some of the truth of what's going on here. Skye Perryman is the president and CEO of Democracy Forward, which sued the U.S. Marshal Service last week, asking why Doge was repeatedly invoking the Marshals while trying to force their way into various buildings in Washington. Ms. Perryman, thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So we've been trying to follow this as it has been unfolding. It sort of dribs and drabs, and now this dramatic unfolding tonight. Let me just ask if there's anything that you know about this that either contradicts what I just said or can further advance the story.
Well, I think what you said is concerning, and 5 alarm, I think is what you called it, as it is what we're hearing. We're hearing concerning reports tonight from people who have been inside the Institute of Peace. And this is really, unfortunately, a pattern. It sounds unbelievable. It sounds terrifying because it is, but this is becoming a pattern. We've seen this at other agencies, including the African Development Foundation, where we also have litigation pending against its on behalf of its chair, who, by the way, is a Republican, that is having to sue because the president is unlawfully removing him, and there was a confrontation. And now we have this, potentially armed confrontation today. This is not America, but this is what is happening in 2025.
The lawsuit that you've already filed concerning the Marshal Service, are you seeking information from the Marshal Service as to whether or not their personnel have been seconded to Doge somehow? Are you trying to find out under what authority whoever those people were might have been operating when they used force to get into that property?
Yes, we actually have been trying to seek that information from the government under the Freedom of Information Act, which you've talked about on your show before, that entitles all Americans to have this information, and the government has refused to provide it. And so that's why we're now again in federal court seeking to have disclosure of communications, of documents That's one of many cases that we have pending right now to get, to really understand what's happening with Doge, with Elon Musk. By the way, because no one voted for Elon Musk or for this, this sort of
This is this century's revolutionary war. This is a hostile government takeover.
Well, I wouldn't say it like that. They took over the government. They took over the government when they won the election. So, it wasn't hostile in that sense. Either way, they cheated or fair and square. They took over the government with the election. Unfortunately, people voted them in. But folks, what do you think about this? This is from 11 days ago. But they're using violence. Doge is using violence. Elon Musk and Donald Trump using violence. Remember what the guy said, Heritage Foundation, that the president of it, but I think he's the president. The guy said earlier, he said the left has to comply. Not exactly. Okay, they have to comply, or there'll be a violence, there'll be blood. They'll be bloodless. He said they'll be bloodless. It won't be bloodless. They don't comply. It'll be blood. That's what he said. So it'll be violence. See, they're threatening violence there. That was a year ago. That was or 8 months ago. Like I said, well, before the elections, and they talk about Supreme Court. There was Supreme Court about Donald Trump there back then. But yeah, so they threaten violence. He's a total fascist. I'm gonna make another video. What I think is gonna happen. People talking about elections. Yeah, is gonna be another election or not? And Trump wants to run again in 4 years. He's not supposed to, but he wants to stay in the power somehow. Some way, somehow he wants to stay in power. These people, they're not gonna give up power that easy. I mean, anyways, folks, what do you think of this video? Thank you, Tabitha, for this video. Tabitha Speaks Politics. Thank you, Tabitha, and I'm out.